How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/US/leading edge.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Farm Here Daily Podcast. I'm David Geiger, your host. Been on Iowa TV and radios for the last decade here in the state, and I'm very excited to be starting up this podcast, Farm Here Daily, with the Field Forward Network. Today we'll be talking about trade missions with the Iowa Corn Growers Association. Dan Keitzer joins us. We'll also cover planting conditions in northeast Iowa. Terry Basol with ISU Extension will go over that. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media with the Field Forward Network. It is listeners like you that keep this type of local content alive, and we would love to have you join our community. All right, joining us today, we have Terry Basol with Iowa State University Extension, agronomist over in the northeastern part of the state. Terry, thanks for joining us today, and tell us what is going on in your part of the state, agronomy-wise.
Agronomy-wise, guys are busy getting at it, getting everything planted here. It finally dried out here late last week, where guys were able to start picking up the southern part of the territory. And by now it's starting to dry out throughout the rest of the territory. So I see a lot of field work and planters moving around our neck of the woods here. So that's great news. Everybody's able to get everything in. Hopefully we got a really good 6 to 10 day forecast in our neck of the woods. So a lot of great productivity and progress happening right now, especially for the corn planting window, and soybeans we have a little bit more time, but corn's more critical to get it done in a timely fashion here to make sure we get that full yield potential for the growing season. So right now we're sitting really good for that. So
how did the rains earlier here in the spring work out for you all over there?
It shut us down for a while. On average, the research farm here at Nashua, or the Northeast Research Farm, just west of Nashua, where my office is here, we got for the month of April 5.07 inches of rain. So it's about, I'm going to say a little over an inch and somewhere between an inch and a half above the 30-year average. So it shut us down for a little while. I'd say a week and a half up to maybe a couple weeks. We had some isolated areas that got a little bit more rain, throughout the in some of that, and so that shut them down for a little bit longer. And then we had those cooler temperatures and things like that, so the soil temps didn't warm up real well either to go with that. So that pretty much slowed us down to pretty much a standstill until late last week, when we were able to get up and running again in parts of the territory.
Now, if you're driving around on the roads, you can see a little bit of emergence going on. So now's kind of a really good point to really get out and take a look at your field, scout and such.
Yes, that's a very good point. Some of that early stuff that got planted, it's starting to pop up. So if you kind of look real close, you can start being able to start rowing it a little bit. And now's the time to get out there and scout it. Make sure that it's emerging the way that you want to have it. Make sure the populations are where you want them to be, because that's very, very important as well. So the earlier that you can see something, the earlier you can correct it or make decisions that you need to for the spring and the rest of the growing season.
Any pest pressures you're particularly watching for this year, 2025?
We're watching. We've had those cool weather, cool, damp, moist kind of conditions here early, and so we get a little bit concerned for black cutworm in those situations because they like those types of scenarios, and so where you've got high residue, where you've got low spots that are poorly drained, things like that. You want to pay particular attention in the field. We're monitoring the moth flight for that and for true armyworm, and so we're probably going to have something coming out here by late last week, kind of giving an idea for cutting dates and things like that to be watching, and paying particular attention. But it's still really good to get out there and start scouting right away, just to make sure that you're on top of everything and you can make the management decisions that you need to in a timely fashion.
Now, that cutworm, your neighbors to the east, I've heard, have already seen some pretty significant flights. We've had a bit fewer, but what's kind of the difference with that dividing line between the east and Iowa?
Well, it just depends upon the prevailing winds. So black cutworms comes up, they overwinter in the south. And so they come up with the prevailing winds, the strong winds that we get through in the spring and things like that. So depending upon how those winds and the storms that we get coming through sometimes can dictate a little bit as far as some of that. But it's something that we definitely want to be watching out in the field and keeping an eye on. So.
Again, we are speaking with Terry Basol, Iowa State University Extension agronomist over in Northeast Iowa. Terry, you mentioned some of the cutting dates as well as some scouting information available from Iowa State University Extension. How would folks find that or take a look for that to get a hold of it?
The best thing is just find the browser that you like to and put Iowa State ICM. Just type in Iowa State ICM and that'll pop right up. You can click on that and it'll take you right to it. So the website itself, if you want to just put in the URL for it, or the address is crops.extension.iastate.edu, and that'll take you right there. And you can browse through and take a look at all of the articles and blog articles and ICM news and all those timely information of agronomic topics that we have there. So we try to keep everybody abreast of what's going on throughout the growing season agronomically, as well as events and things like that are pertinent for everybody to be able to educate themselves and help out through the growing season.
Good to know. Before I let you go, next couple of weeks, what are you really watching for? What are you keeping your eye on?
Well, we're watching weather, right, to be able to see what our planting window is. Hopefully everybody's able to get everything in and we won't be getting too much rain, right, so that they're able to get it. Soil moisture is still important. We started a little bit drier. We've gotten some nice rains here through the state to help us with good moisture now for emergence and things like that. But we still want good, timely rains throughout the growing season to help push and keep that crop where we need it to be for the rest of the growing season. Insects, some of those things. Weed control, you get everything in the ground, and then the next thing you need to do is start thinking, keeping everything clean, before the corn gets too big and the labels are not allowing you to be able to apply the product that you want to. So that's probably the big thing, is just getting out there and then start running on some of that. And then for those that side dress, that's another timing coming up here within the next 3 to 4 weeks, trying to get a good side dress done, things like that. So.
Terry Basol, Iowa State University Extension agronomist in Northeast Iowa, joining us. Thanks again for your time here on Farm Here Daily.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to jump into the closing market numbers for Wednesday here. Let's take a look at that. It was a negative trading day. Looks like for the close, May corn down 6.5 cents at $4.41. July falling 6.25 cents at $4.49 May soybeans 4.25 weaker at $10.30.5. July falling 2 cents at $10.39.25. Soybean meal in May $1.90 a ton in the green at $288 even. With May wheat down a cent at $5.18 and July falling a penny and 3/4 at $5.34.25. In the livestock market close for Wednesday, also red across the board there. Live cattle in June down $1.15, a hundredweight at $212.52, with August decreasing $1 at $208.37. Feeder cattle in May $1.27 weaker at $294.45, with August a decrease of 60 cents there at $298.60. Lean hogs in May 40 cents a hundredweight lower at $91.15, with June falling 25 cents a hundredweight, $97.32. That is the Wednesday market close here on the Farm Here Daily podcast. All right, we have joining us from the planter, Dan Keitzer, a farmer in Des Moines County. He is the Iowa Corn Growers Association Director representing District 9, as well as the chair of the Industrial Usage and U.S. Production Committee. Dan, so excited to be able to talk to you, and let's start off with that. Well, you're reaching out right from the planter. How's that going this season?
Well, we just got started. This is being recorded on Wednesday afternoon, and we just got started here in Southeast Iowa here this afternoon. We've had about almost 2 inches of rain over the last week, and most of the corn in this area is planted, and most of the soybeans. There's a lot of people are kind of starting to wrap up, and some people are done. But for the most part, we've had some good windows, but they've been kind of far between because we've had quite a bit of precipitation too.
Yeah, that rain really helped fill out some of the soil moisture levels we've seen in the past couple weeks.
Yeah, it has. And the other nice thing is we planted a lot of crop early, and then we had some really hard rains, and so there was going to be some emergence issues. And so this rain that we got here about a week ago really helped out some of that early planted crop to get through the ground. And really, the early planted corn right now, the stands look really good. It's really come along here in the last few days with the heat units.
You've certainly been busy out there planting right now, but also this last month you were very busy out and about. And I was noting the Iowa Corn Growers Association just released a document on supporting international trade. Can we start off talking about that, and we can get into some of your journeys across the globe?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Let's go into that. Supporting international trade. What is the latest from the Iowa Corn Growers on getting into international trade?
Well, obviously, our biggest market for corn in Iowa is obviously ethanol, but exports are another great market for corn, as well as animal and livestock feed. So on the export side, we're blessed to have two good navigable waterways on both sides of our state. So that makes us a prime candidate to get grain out of the state and overseas. So we tend to work with the U.S. Grains Council. We're a member of the U.S. Grains Council, along with a lot of export companies and other grain organizations. And with partnering with the U.S. Grains Council, that allows us to have staff overseas in a lot of different locations, which we couldn't just as Iowa Corn alone.
And one of those locations you guys went to this past March was the Philippines. Tell me about that.
So we have a staff in Southeast Asia, and they, along with wheat and soybeans, grain sorghum, put on a conference in Southeast Asia. I think it's an annual conference, and it kind of moves around Southeast Asia, called the Southeast Asia Ag Buyers Conference. And so I was able to attend that and give a presentation to the buyers on my presentation was kind of working around three main themes. One, they kind of want to see just what a farming operation in Iowa and the United States looks like. So part of my presentation was obviously pictures from the planter like I'm in today, and pictures of our grain harvest and a lot of things that we're doing to be sustainable and how we're producing a bigger crop every year on fewer land acres and actually on less fertilizer. And so they like to talk about sustainability. I also impressed upon them that we are a ready supplier of corn. Every year we have at least 1 billion bushel that we carry over from one marketing year to the next. And so I kind of had a chart on that showing that how that varies a little bit, but we do never run out of corn, and we can always sell corn and supply them for their needs. And then the other part is just thanking them for their business. Southeast Asia is a growing region. Actually right now, I'm not going to say this, I guess, because I can't remember the number out here in the planter, but their population continues to grow, and there's a big percentage of the world population live in the Southeast Asia region. And so they have been a great partner for us in both corn, distillers' dried grain used to feed their livestock, as well as ethanol. And so part of my journeys there, we actually went out and talked to met with an oil distributor in the Philippines. The Philippines right now has a 10% mandate on ethanol. And with that mandate, they also produce some of their own ethanol from sugarcane. So to meet the 10% mandate, all that ethanol has to be made in the Philippines. But they also have a 20% discretionary ethanol that they can put in their fuel. And so some of the distributors now are starting to put 20% in, and that 10% of that 20, or the other half, over the 10%, can come from export markets, and they can actually import American ethanol way cheaper than they can buy the ethanol from the sugarcane producers in the Philippines. So that looks like that's going to be a great market for us as that 20% kind of takes off and there's hold over there. The station that I was able to go to was the first station that offers the 20% ethanol, and it is priced at a lesser rate than the 10% ethanol. So it's a value for their consumer. Money is tight over there. It's a big population. I think Manila area is one of the most densely populated regions in the world. And so their consumers are they're very price conscious. So we think as that 20% discretionary ethanol starts taking off at more stations, it'll be a great market for our United States produced ethanol.
We're speaking with Dan Keitzer. He is the Iowa Corn Growers Association Director representing District 9. He's also the chair of the Industrial Usage and U.S. Production Committee. Dan, when I think about these trade missions, I just recall, obviously, that farming is a business, and business relies on relationships. You don't want to go talk to people or make deals with people you don't know. What did it feel like in meeting the folks that we sell our corn to and potentially have the opportunity to sell our ethanol to over there in the Philippines?
The Philippine or the Southeast Asian population is a very friendly population. And part of my goal as I make these presentations around the world, I've been to a couple other places, is not necessarily to educate them in the presentation, but to get them to come up and talk to me, to basically stimulate questions, to get them to talk to me at breaks and meals and that kind of stuff. And so I had a lot of great conversations. A couple very interesting ones. One interesting one was a fellow came up to me, handed me his business card. I didn't really get a chance to look at it, and he wanted to ask me about the technology that we use in our planter, because I showed a picture of the screens, and he wanted to know if I had any videos on how we use that technology. And I said, I think I can email some to you. And of course, I went to Ag Leader and John Deere and their sites and found some training videos and sent him. But then his next question was very unique. He said, if I could get, and actually he was from Singapore, and he worked for a company called U.S. Global Trade, or not U.S. Global Trading, but Global Trading, and I found out it's a worldwide company that trades everything from petroleum to grains to precious metals and all that. But anyway, he said, if I can get a couple weeks off of work, can I come over and work with you on your farm? And that kind of took me back. I had to think about that for a minute, and I was thinking, I'm not sure how my wife would take that when I come home and said, that spare bedroom that the kids used to use, We got a friend coming from Singapore to stay with us. But anyway, I encouraged him. I said, yeah, please try to. I don't know that you'd be at my place for a couple weeks, but yet we could get you tours of ethanol plants, grain loading facilities, other farms, livestock production, whatever your interests are. And I'm still communicating with him via email, so I'm hoping that does take place in the future. But that was a very unique, interesting request that I never had.
That is amazing. I'd like to follow up on that. Hopefully that works out well. It's funny to think of, hey, can I take a vacation to go work?
and the interesting thing was, again, I was not familiar with the guy. And he gave me his name, and when I mentioned we have staff over there, and after the meetings, I was showing them the card and say, hey, this guy wants to come to the United States. We may need to try to make that happen. And they, I'm thinking, he's just, I didn't even know anything about his company. And I'm thinking, he's just somebody that works in the grain market. They looked at the card and they said, he wants to come to the United States. He's evidently a fairly high up trader in Southeast Asia. They were very familiar with him. Another interesting interview I had over there was with Bloomberg, and she was actually a reporter from China, and she came up to me at break and said she'd never spoken to an American farmer and wanted to know if we could sit down and talk about, things affecting American farmers. And I obviously said yes, but I was a little concerned about exactly where that interview may go, considering that China can be obviously, a place you got to be a little concerned with. And obviously
a bit of a love-hate relationship there.
Yeah. And one of her first questions was, how does the American farmer feel about the tariffs, And so you got to kind of talk about that with, hey, there's obviously apprehension. I think we're all apprehensive about things that we don't know exactly how they're going to turn out. But yet, in the first term of Trump, he was a pretty good negotiator with China. We came out pretty good in the end, but there's obviously some pain. But that was obviously a very interesting interview too. So that's what makes these trade missions, is they can put a face to the people who are producing the crop that they're buying and they're utilizing.
Well, live from the planter, we have Dan Keitzer. Thank you so much for joining us. And how much time do you think you got left to plant?
Planting, we've got about 3 days of soybeans, and we actually plant seed corn for one of the seed corn companies, and they have not turned us loose yet. So they're going to start Monday of next week, and that can be kind of a drawn-out affair because they plant their corn. They got to plant their seed over time because of their ability to do the detasseling. They only have so much capacity to detassel on any given day. So that may go up till maybe potentially June 1st. So we'll see how it goes.
Dan Keitzer in the planter here in Des Moines County. He is the Iowa Corn Growers Association Director representing District 9. He's also the chair of the Industrial Usage and U.S. Production Committee. Really appreciate having you here.
Thank you, Dave. I really enjoyed the interview, and keep up the good work in ag broadcasting.
Thanks for that, Dan. I appreciate it. And also, big thanks to the listeners. It's because of you we can produce this type of local Iowa content. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at the Field Forward Network. Additionally, you can find me, David Geiger, on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as WHO TV Channel 13 every day in their morning and noon hour programs. Until next time, everybody.